When we think of the European colonial powers, the first names that come to mind are Spain, Great Britain, and France. The Netherlands and Belgium are probably also familiar to most people. However, the colonial activities of an inconspicuous duchy between the great powers are often overlooked. We are, of course, talking about Luxembourg. Although the small state is often overlooked in geopolitical contexts, it was unusually heavily involved in colonialism. Not only did the Luxembourgers set out in search of their own colonies, they also profited massively from oppression in Africa and played an important role in maintaining what was probably the most brutal colony in Africa, the Belgian Congo. In today's video, we take a look at Luxembourg's forgotten colonial history. Why did the Luxembourgers get into the colonial business in the first place? What were Luxembourg's ambitions, and why did it play such an important role in the Belgian Congo? Let's get started. Luxembourg was more or less under French rule until the Napoleonic Wars, but this changed with the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Although it gained its independence as a Grand Duchy under the personal union with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, it also became a member of the newly founded German Confederation. This dual role led to a unique political situation in which Luxembourg was linked to both the Netherlands and the German Confederation. On the other hand, however, it now had the greatest possible autonomy again after a long time. The Belgian Revolution of 1830 and the subsequent independence of Belgium led to further changes. Luxembourg was divided. The larger French-speaking part joined Belgium, while the remaining German-speaking part continued to belong to the German Confederation and maintained a personal union with the Netherlands. It was not until 1867, after the Luxembourg crisis in which Prussia and France negotiated the status of Luxembourg, that Luxembourg's complete independence and neutrality was enshrined in the Treaty of London. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Luxembourg's history, in which the country freed itself from foreign interference and became internationally active itself. And it was precisely at this time that the massive colonization of Africa took place. As a large part of Luxembourg had been absorbed into Belgium, the two countries continued to maintain close ties. It is therefore not surprising that Luxembourg was also heavily involved in Belgium's colonization plans. The Belgian King Leopold II was one of the most ardent supporters of colonization, and the Berlin Conference in 1885 gave him the go-ahead to expand into Africa. In Central Africa, in what is now the Congo, the major European powers created a huge area as a buffer between their own interests, and this was given to the Belgian king as private property. And to understand the sheer scale of this, we need to briefly consider the figures. While Belgium had an area of around 30,000 square kilometers, as it does today, Leopold's Congo territory covered an area of over 2.3 million square kilometers. The colony was therefore around 80 times the size of Belgium itself. And since he wanted to transform the entire country into a so-called model colony, it was clear that he would need help. And this is exactly where the Luxembourgers stepped in. Not only did Luxembourg offer additional military support and human capital, it also presented an economic opportunity that would benefit both sides. Luxembourg investors were therefore the first to invest in the expansion of the model colony, providing massive support for the machinery of oppression in the Congo. The Congo colony under Leopold II was to develop into the most brutal colony on the entire continent over the next few decades. Estimates range from 10 to 15 million deaths during the period of Belgian colonization. King Leopold II was invariably interested in the enormous riches of the Congo, especially the natural resources such as ivory and rubber. The global boom in demand for rubber, driven by the Industrial Revolution and the development of products such as car tires and insulated electrical cables, led to a ruthless exploitation of these resources. In order to achieve maximum profitability, the indigenous population was forced to work under extremely brutal conditions. A notorious system of punishment and intimidation was employed, including the amputation of hands as punishment for failing to meet quotas. This led to widespread atrocities and high death rates, and several Luxembourgers held key positions throughout the period of the Congo Free State as well as the Belgian Congo. These included high-ranking generals who made careers in the Belgian military and expeditionary corps, but also engineers and business moguls who were involved in developing and maintaining the brutal system. However, it was not only individual actors who were involved in colonization, but also the Luxembourg state as a whole. At the end of the 19th century, several state-subsidized colonial associations were founded. These included the Cercle Colonial Luxembourgeois and the Alliance Coloniale Luxembourg Outre-mer, and the state used colonial propaganda to encourage its citizens to participate in colonization. As a result, thousands of Luxembourgers left for the world. In retrospect, the Luxembourg state is said to have harbored its own colonial ambitions as a result. However, this quickly seemed doomed to failure. Luxembourg simply had too small a population to exercise rule in other states, and the lack of access to the sea meant that it was always dependent on the other colonial powers. And so, despite the emigration of numerous Luxembourgers to the Congo, there was no secession of a small Luxembourg colony. This was also because it was clear that Leopold II would not give up an inch of his possessions. However, Luxembourg's colonial interests were not limited to the Congo. It also had a hand in other colonies. Over 1,000 Luxembourg mercenaries fought for the Dutch colonial army in Indonesia. Missionaries and nuns from Luxembourg were active on all continents, and there was a real colonial school in Marienthal. Luxembourg's state representatives also later maintained close relations with other unjust colonial regimes, such as the South African apartheid regime or the Portuguese Estado Novo, which was the last to give up its colonies in the 1970s. And Luxembourg politicians, clergymen, officers, and investors also made careers in French, Spanish, and British colonies, or owned their own plantations in Africa, America, or Asia. In any case, the main activity remained in the Congo, even after Leopold II had to cede his private colony and it fell into the hands of the Belgian state. From 1900 onwards, missionaries and former employees began to report on the atrocities that were taking place in Leopold's colony in isolation from the rest of the world. This led to worldwide outrage and even shocked the other colonial powers, although of course they did not treat their own colonies squeamishly either. The Congo Free State was therefore handed over to the Belgian state in 1908 and renamed the Belgian Congo, which ushered in a somewhat milder but still problematic colonial administration. The Luxembourgers now collaborated directly with the Belgian state in order to maintain the exploitation of the colony. Economically, it was extremely profitable. Several Luxembourg companies were involved in the import of raw materials such as rubber and ivory, which were then either processed locally or sold on to Germany, France, and other neighboring countries. The trade in colonial goods also led to economic diversification in Luxembourg, especially at a time when the country was trying to expand its industrial base beyond the steel industry. It also laid the foundations for the later high employment and economic growth. For a long time, Luxembourg hid from its colonial entanglements. The motto was always that Luxembourg was not an official colonial power and never had any formal colonies. But as we have seen today, it is not that simple. Although Luxembourg was not a colonial power in the traditional sense, its military, political, and economic involvement in several colonies shows that smaller states were also integrated into the global network of colonialism, and not just as an observer who benefited in some places, but as an active participant. Luxembourg played a significant role in the colonialism project on an official and individual level, supporting it and deriving economic benefits from it. And so today, we have seen a somewhat different colonial history.